from my perspective, the idea is obviously the most important thing that Aboriginal people can do. We have the poorest population in Canada, fastest growing population, and given the demographics, it's absolutely fundamental that Aboriginal people be educated up to the same level as everybody else. And the current system is failing miserably on a variety of accounts, and that's what the paper intends to address.
There are several things, all of them intertwined, that are wrong with the current system. The fundamental problem that links them all is that the current system doesn't empower the individual student to take control of their own educational future. There are rumors and more than rumors, there's evidence of students being waitlisted for funding, of funding being rationed, of widespread nepotism and favoritism in which relationships with influential band members and with chief and council influence whether or not students receive funding. Off-reserve students, because of no relationships with band members, are frequently, almost always, receive no funding. And so the fundamental problem with all of these is that there's no accountability and there's no transparency built into the mechanism. So what we're proposing is a way to empower the individual Aboriginal students and to make sure that the money goes directly from the government to the students, who then are able to have the freedom to decide what post-secondary education they want with the rest of their life, and this decision is unrestrained by memberships with relationships with people on chief and council. The current system is really beyond repair because the idea behind the current system is that the students shouldn't be able to make the decisions for themselves about what form of education they have. And so while proposals have been brought forward in the past with respect to bringing in some other organization who administers the funding, by increasing accountability mechanisms, so long as the money doesn't flow to the individual student, there's no guarantee, and I believe no real way that transparency, that accountability, that universality, regardless with respect to whether the students are on or off reserve, these can't be achieved within the current system. So while undoubtedly there could be minor changes that could tweak and make the system perform slightly better, the fact is that the system's not working, and that real reform needs to come by empowering individual Aboriginal students.
The way the current system works is it politicizes the decision-making for who gets funding, and it introduces a lot of the political pathologies of Aboriginal political organizations that have no place in decision-making for something as important as education. So what we're proposing completely empowers the student and allows them to make decisions in relation to their own education.
The proposed system will avoid all of these problems with respect to fraud, with respect to fairness, with accountability, by taking the money and placing it in an account that's held in trust for the Aboriginal students. Each student who is registered as a status Indian will receive an account at birth, and the money will be placed away from any government official to touch, away from any chief and council or member of any political stripes, cannot have any influence over this money. The only person who has influence over deciding where the money goes and what sort of education is pursued is the individual student. And it's also worth pointing out that there will be strict controls put in place, as there are with registered education saving plans and with scholarships, grants, and bursaries, to ensure that the money is put toward post-secondary education and living expenses and things related to the education itself. So the only person who has the opportunity to determine where the money goes is the student, and there's also controls to ensure that the money goes for its intended purposes.
Well, it's certainly not as patronizing as the existing system, if that is a criticism leveled against what we're proposing. In fact, what we're proposing is actually neutral. There is no unseen political hand or any other kind of hand that can determine who gets funded and who does not get funded. Everybody has the right to receive an education and have it paid for under this system that's proposed. And what I think is advantageous about what has been proposed in the paper is that we've created an incentive for young Aboriginal people to finish high school by increasing their account from grade 6 to 12 every year, by adding, every time they graduate a grade, they have more monies put into their account, so that at the end of their grade 12 period, if they graduate, they have about $25,000 in an account. And right now, the students that get funded, it's a kind of hit and miss system, depending on where you're born, what band you're in, and what they're doing with the funds, because it's at the discretion of the bands to do whatever they, well, to some extent, to do whatever they want with the funds. What we're proposing will take away all of that uncertainty and put the power and the incentives for education into the hands of the people where it should be, in the students' hands.
I would just add as well that leveled against any accusation that this might be patronizing, that this is, for me, the opposite of patronizing, because it empowers the students. It implies that these students are fully autonomous and fully capable of making their own decisions with respect to what kind of education they want with their future. It doesn't put on them, it just merely creates an incentive. It doesn't tell them what they have to do. It doesn't tell them what school they have to go to. And this is clearly at odds with the current system, which assumes that students aren't capable of making the best decisions, and that the decisions first need to go through band leadership before individual Aboriginals can decide what's best for their own future.
I would say there isn't any more urgent problem. The greatest and quickest way out of poverty is to educate the population. There is abundant evidence throughout the world that the fastest way to improve poverty is to educate your population. So there are enough unsustainable and various kinds of social welfare programs that are never going to lead to any kind of self-reliance for young Aboriginal people, or to be able to allow them to have a better way of life. And education is really the only way out for a lot of people.
The current program, as it stands, costs Canadian taxpayers $314 million, or what it cost last year, and is subject to up to 2% annual increase. Under our proposal, the amount of money that would be spent by the federal government on this program would be nearly identical. Of course, right now there are roughly 105,000 students who are between the grades of 6 and 12, and so under this proposal, each year those students would be receiving $3,000 for the successful completion of a grade. Now, of course, not every potential student is going to complete the grade. These numbers will be subject to fluctuations, and under our proposal there will be transition costs that need to be set up. But at the same time, we're confident that the money spent on this program will be roughly identical to what's spent, and will result in a much more efficient, transparent system. And as Calvin can certainly mention, there is a cost of doing nothing. And right now we're paying that cost every single year, whereas this system will ensure that the money meant for education is actually spent on post-secondary education.